problem of everyone. I think we might get started. Shelley, can you put the session notes in the chat, please?
Indeed.
And everyone, there's a space for you to join. We've had a few last minute hiccups with organising this program, so I hope you will bear with us. For various reasons, a few people have had to change their plans. So it's a bit of a running feast. And also I will have to leave 15 minutes early because the next session that I was just one of the associate chairs, the main chair has gone down with COVID and has asked me to run it. So I'm going to have to run. And Shelley's kindly offered to be a backup for me. Okay. So welcome to this session, and the chairs are Helen, Shelley, Danny, myself and Pedro. Helen has apologised for not being able to attend. She's gone down with, or she's just recovering from a very nasty dose of COVID. Okay, all right, so whoops. The goals of the Earth, Space and Environmental Science Interest Group is to work towards coordinating and harmonising multiple international efforts, both in interdisciplinary and domain-specific fair data infrastructure, vocabularies, and common data digital services. We really, in this group, are seeking to reduce possible duplication, increase efficiency, share use cases, and promote partnerships in the global community. So basically, this is not so much a working group, but an interest group where people can come along and present ideas on, or just inform us of exactly what you're doing, where, and spread the word. And the usual format for our meeting is we have a heap of 5-minute short presentations. So if you're in the audience and you haven't prepared anything, but you do have a new project, we will give you the opportunity to take the floor and be able to say something on it. Then we have usually have a couple of deep dives, and I'd just like to announce, in case you've come for it, the Planetary deep dive has had to be withdrawn, but Kirsten will be here on the program to just talk briefly about what she's doing and try and organise something with you subsequent to this meeting. So the objectives of this are to continue mapping the landscape of Earth-based environmental science data infrastructures and further refinement of our famous catalogues. We're going to showcase some new projects and provide updates on the Complex Data Citation Working Group, which has been a spin-off from this interest group. And Danny will be here to present more on her potential working group on coordinating ESES data preservation and scholarly publication process. And as I said, Kirsten will highlight some work going on in planetary sciences, but it's just now, unfortunately, it's had to be reduced to a 5-minute presentation. So here is our agenda, and I'm not quite sure it's up to date. So we'll go into the catalogues. I'll give you an update on both of them. Then we have this the short presentations, and please volunteer any items if you want to say something that's new. And Kerry Levitt, did I see you're here? Because if you are, I'll ask you to just briefly say something about the new ARDC's Research Data Commons. So that's giving you a few bits of warning. Whoops, what's gone wrong? Okay, so I don't know what happened there. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, all right, so the meeting notes are here, and please fill it in. And also, as we say, we're a reasonably well-established interest group. if you want to, please sign up. And Shelley, you could put the link in the chat for me, could you, to the. So, as I said, we've been going since an initial meeting in the basement at Montreal in 2017. And I guess a particular focus, which is why we're at this one, is at the moment, we feel we are too dominated by the global north. That is, most of our membership is from Australia, Europe, and North America. We really would like to get more contacts in South America, Africa, and Asia and China. And we do try and get speakers from these countries, but it's usually not all that easy. Although if Pedro's here, we'll be asking him to give us an update on Brazil. But the important point is we're just here to find out what's going up. It's bottom up. And then through sharing who's doing what where, we hope we can stop reinventing the wheel. I'm a great believer if someone else is already doing it, for crying out loud, go and join them. Okay, and so as I said here, we have 2 catalogues, and I'm not game to do them, but Shelley might be able to put the links. The first one is the data infrastructure catalogue. That's been fairly static. Not many people have added anything to it of late. But the important thing is if you've got a program that's developing data infrastructures, please add it to that. The bigger highlight is the Semantic Resources Catalogue, which has got vocabs, ontologies, anything that is an online resource. Now, Shelley, you might be able to give us an update. There was a session yesterday on Earth and Environmental Science vocabs. That vocabulary list, that was the past session. Were you at that yesterday with Alison?
Yes, I was.
Okay, all right. So just as background, we have been approached to try and do something with that list. At the moment, it's just a static list. And it's like just before every meeting, I have a look at it and someone's added something to it. But we don't have the resources to turn it into anything or do something with it. So was there any update from the meeting that was held yesterday with the group that's trying to start to work on harmonizing Earth and environmental science vocabularies globally? Shelley?
We had, it was an excellent session, and we walked through several speakers who were talking, actually we had a speaker from ARDC talking about the work that's happening there, as well as fire fuels, wildfire fuel, combining different types of data sets to predict impact on wildfire. That was Australia. And the iAdopt folks who are working on framework for vocabulary. And there was one other speaker, and they just flew out of my head. Sorry, forgive me. But what was really nice is they all came at it from the point of view of what researchers need and how to help researchers. The library community, it was the fourth speaker. So it wasn't so much how to deal with managing our own catalog, but more how to help a researcher figure out which vocabulary to use. So I think that's probably a good summary.
Okay, thanks, Shelley. Just to reiterate, we're just keeping that catalog going for people to add things to it. It's more whether we want to turn it into something like biosharing, where it becomes a formal register where people can actively get into the systems. But at the moment, as I said, it just keeps on ticking over, and every time I look at it, I said, oh, someone's added that. So please add semantic resources to it. And at the moment within this group, we have no plans to do anything with it other than keep it going. Okay, so we've got a series of lightning presentations, and why on earth did I put myself first? I don't know, but anyway, sounds like this session's becoming a monologue from me, which I hope it won't be. Okay, so all right, so let's go into our lightning talks. And I just want to mention this one. Some of you may have been for this on Monday, was it? It's just been funded with 1.98 million over 2 years. It's coordinated by CoData and the Research Data Alliance as a major partner, and it has just started. And this is called the World Fair Daisy or petal diagram. You can actually see the groups are in it. So there's 11 case studies, which are working packages, and there's a project mode, management and coordination and outreach, the usual things you have on projects. The really important one is, if you like, the center, which is engagement, synthesis, recommendations, and assessments. And so really, as you can see, you've got chemistry, nanomaterials, etc. around the edge, okay? But this darker area in the middle is where we're going to try and share things in how we're setting up our vocabularies, etc., so that we can start to do cross-domain. And the reason why I bought this is that when we actually started this group, Shelley, as you'll remember, in the early days, people were just coming at us saying, do something on vocabularies and do it so they're cross-domain. And we were never able to get that going within RDA itself, but you can see here that we've got something finally on paper and which is funded. And there are 19 partners from Africa, Australasia, Europe, North and South America. So I'm kind of optimistic that through this process, we'll start to get those connections to the global South that this group has been struggling to try and get. Another more important thing is that they're actually grouped into themes. And so the group I'm mainly associated with is geochemistry, because those of you who may know my history, I'm actually a geochemist. That's my specialty. But you can see here how we're tied in with nanomaterials, who are really working hard on the INCHI identifier for substances. But more importantly, we're connected through to chemistry, which is the International Union of Pure and Applied Chemistry. And we have every intention under the sun of leveraging, plagiarizing, whatever the correct word is, how the chemistry group has developed their standards, their vocabs, because then theoretically they've got most of what we want. And if we then combine with the vocabularies out of the International Union of Geological Sciences, you can see how you create geochemistry standards. And there's lots of other examples going through these other groupings where once they got together, they actually started to see, gosh, we have a lot in common. So the project will introduce usage of fair implementation profiles to increase machine readability of data. We'll be contributing to projects such as the UN Sustainability Development Goals, the International Science Council Decadal Plan, and we'll be testing the ideas of a cross-domain interoperability framework. So yes, we can work out where the connections are, but let's build this up into a sustainable framework. But above all, we're respecting that there is deep disciplinary research and innovation within the individual disciplines. So we've got to make sure that we don't genericize things so much that we can't allow for that deeper research, and respect the researchers that get very angry when you tell them to use some generic metadata profile that they can't see any sense in. You get my message. And so again, I'm really fascinated with how these fair implementation profiles work, because what it means is at the data set level, that's how you declare how it's fair. And you have a, this will be a searchable record in a registry, so that when you pick up that data set, you know exactly which standard, which vocabularies have been used. And so through machine to machine, which is what FAIR is all about, you can then start to combine data both within and across other disciplines. Okay, so that's the end of me. Now I'll hand over to Sarah. Sarah, do you want me to run your slides, or do you want to share your
Yeah,
screen?
If you don't want to, sorry, can't speak. If you don't mind just sharing the slides, that would be great.
Okay, it'd be easier actually. Okay, go for it, Sarah. It's over to you.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Ramdeen, and I'm the co-chair of the ESIP Physical Samples Curation Cluster.
Sorry.
You're hopping to the slides. Okay.
There we are. I was looking at the
All
chat.
right.
Sorry, mustn't multitask.
So for those who aren't aware, ESIP is the Earth Science Information Partners. It's an organization based out of the US, but I don't believe there's any restrictions to joining as a member. But it is a membership community around the earth sciences. The way it works is it's similar how RDA has interest group and working groups. ESIP has clusters. So I'm co-chair of the Physical Samples Curation Cluster along with Val Stanley. And we were just using this as an opportunity to bring up some awareness of our cluster and our activities. So the cluster goals include, we want to do a review of what existing tools and services already exist in the community before perhaps recommending creation of new ones. We thought it would be a very good idea to see what already exists and how we might be able to share those, similar to what some of the topics already talked about. Leslie mentioned earlier, not reinventing the wheel, but being able to reshare something that maybe one community is using to another. We also wanted to use it as a space to discuss methods for workflows. That's been an important aspect of our community. As noted in the title, we have curation in there. A lot of our members come from repositories. And so there was that aspect of how do we build workflows across the sample lifecycle, especially as they're going from scientist to repository and then maybe reuse. One of our other goals is to connect with new partners in other communities. And so again, that's why we're here speaking, is to make connections to those in the RDA community. Next slide, please. Some of our past activities within the cluster have included, we did a joint webinar series with the Physical Samples and Collections Research Data Ecosystem Interest Group here within RDA. There were 3 webinars. You can see the names and the links to them here. I believe you can also find them through the RDA YouTube channel. We paused that series in around December just because of the holidays and vacation time. And then we haven't had a chance to pick it back up yet. A lot of us that were working on it got a bit overwhelmed and we're looking for someone else to lead that activity. So if you have any interest in that area, please reach out to us. Next slide, please. Right now, the cluster is working on an activity where we're creating guidelines for publishing samples and sample-related data. This is in partnership with AGU as our first adopter. In particular, we're looking to create guidelines to tell people a little bit more. It's from the publishers to the authors, so the authors are aware of what they should include in their publications. So the guide will have some information on how to identify your samples in a publication, how to select a repository for both the physical sample and the sample metadata. And we're still discussing if the sample related data is within scope of these guidelines, in particular because of just our samples really that different from other data. We're still debating that. They will also include details on how to include citations to samples in your publications. And then also it's important that you talk about how the samples are available and how that should be reviewed during peer review. So if you're interested in this activity that we're working on, you can see the public document is in that top link on bit.ly, and the bottom link is a poster that we recently presented at Spinach where you can see a little bit more information about this project. Next slide, please. And also, before I forget, we did do a little bit deeper dive into this in last night's physical samples interest group session. So the harmonizing vocabularies, sorry, not harmonizing acknowledgements and citations. So if you're interested in that, if you look at the recording, you'll hear a little bit more about that activity and a little bit more depth in what the needs are with it at this time. And so here's just a little bit of information about how you can engage with us in the physical samples curation cluster. You can sign up for our listserv. You can join our session at ESIP. ESIP does require registration, but we'll be talking more about those guidelines during our session at the ESIP July meeting. You can join our monthly telecons. Those are open to anyone. They're the third Monday of the month. We're not meeting in July because we have that ESIP July meeting. But if you'd like to join us in August, our next session will be August 16th at 4 p.m. Eastern. And then you can also find more information about our cluster and just check there for news and updates on our website. But thank you for the opportunity to share our group with this community. And that should be.
Thank you, Sarah. Just okay. Thanks, Sarah, for that. And for those of you who are from Australia, Australia is just about to start. It'll be all coordinated by ARDC, a physical samples cluster group, and we're really looking forward to working closely with you. If it wasn't for the time zone problem, I'd just be recommending that Australians join your group because I find it really great. So if you're in North America or Europe, it's friendly for you. And it's some excellent work goes on in that cluster if you'd like to join. Okay, so now we'll move on to this work being led by Deb, Shelley and Martina, because I'm going to confess I kind of dropped out of it, but I'm really looking forward to this presentation because I must have been at 3 meetings last week in Australia where the need for something to be done about complex data citation came up. And I'd also like to highlight that this started in this partly in AGU and also within this interest group. And now they're moving on to forming a full-blown RDA working group. So I'll pass over to Deb, who's going to present. Over to you, Deb.
Thanks so much, Leslie. And don't worry, we're going to draw you back in. We know you're busy. So Leslie largely already introduced the first slide, so let's go on to the next one. So what do we mean by complex data citation? And there's a whole lot of different problems with data citation, but this one is around the fact that as you add data citations to the things that you're citing in a paper, you often go over the limit of what that publisher will accept as the number of citations. And just as an example, the graph that you see on the left here, that involved 177 different data sources to create that graph. And the picture on the right, actually the other way around. Sorry, I don't know my right from my left sometimes. On the right is the one with 177, and on the left below has 212 data sources to it. These both happen to be from a FluxNet data paper. The way we got around the challenges with citing all of these is we brought them all into the author list, but that brought the new challenge of that we couldn't have more than 500 authors, which actually there was more than 1,000 if we'd actually been able to allow all the authors to the data. So that gives you kind of the idea of the problem that we're trying to work on. It's really around enabling that research output can appropriately reference large numbers of research objects, which data sort of has typically taken us over the edge. And I will say, the last couple of papers that I've been part of publishing, we've hit this problem where publishers have pushed back. Even on a data paper, they've told us to put the data citations in a supplementary material. So you know, this is happening to everybody I talk to. So next slide. So what are our objectives? You know, so I largely said it, you know, a piece of it is to enable those data citations, or I want to say direct citations, because there's been mechanisms where we can do an indirect citation, like a data paper that then is cited by the paper or things like that. But that doesn't really allow the countability of the usage of that data in a way that we'd like. And so what we're looking for is really something that allows you to make direct citation of large numbers of papers, software, and data sets, but where there's a means of collapsing them into a single item in the reference section. And so we'll talk a little bit about sort of the idea that we're going after. and you know, the idea of what I mean by direct citation is really that you're able, even though it's been collapsed into a single reference, that you're able to cite it in a way that actually causes that there's a recognition that data element or whatever other element is in that collapsed entity is actually being cited as a primary citation in the research output. And really, you know, a key element of this is that we've got to be able to empower an individual to do those citations and to create these objects, and it needs to be able to be that one of these can span multiple repositories, and that there's objects from multiple places and not always just from one place. And we want to be able to track these direct citations such that, you know, repositories, data providers, others can actually figure out where their data's been used and how often and things like that. So for the purposes of the rest of this little presentation, and actually so far in the group, we're going to refer to this collapsed object as a reliquary. And the only reason we picked that is, one, because that'll sort of force everybody to come up with a new name, because everybody dislikes that name, except for it's kind of fun. Because there's so many, almost every other word we came up with is in use already in this community and has a different meaning. So that's a lot of why we called it something kind of out there, and because we enjoyed it. Next slide. So as Leslie already said, since AGU 2020, we talked about this problem, and we formed a community of practice, and that was Shelley Stahl, Chris Erdman, Carolyn Coward, and myself that formed that. This is just an idea of the breadth of the types of groups that are involved. This isn't exhaustive, but it gives you an idea that, you know, there's everybody from the academic publishers to the infrastructure groups. And then we have several use cases that have come to the table explaining why their particular type of data needs a solution to this and what the characteristics of their data are. So next slide. So these are the three primary use cases that we have. We have several other, and we want to hear from many more of you with use cases. But James and Justin brought the British Oceanographic Data Center. That's one where they actually take the original data that's generated from these ocean cruises and other things. They break that apart into various pieces, and then they build data products from that. So it's a very complex traceability into which data, where, and what should be credited. And they feel like this reliquary approach would actually provide them a means to actually enable that. Martina Stockhouse has been involved with the use case from the IPCC reports. And they're similar to that diagram, you know, that first graph that I showed on the right of one of my early slides. In the IPCC report, there's figures that were built out of a large number of data sources and software and other pieces, and they need an ability to have a compact reference there in the figure caption so that people can understand what went into creating that caption. In my case, the use case is actually the carbon flux networks, both the global one and the one for the Americas. And there we have on the order of 400 separate data sources that are separate teams generating data. Many people use these data sets all together, and having to cite 400 sources is difficult, to say the least. And generally a publisher won't allow it. So next slide. So, you know, this is from some of Shelley's information. You know, basically, this has become critical. You know, journals are to the point where they're pushing back when there's more than 50 citations in a paper, and, you know, in that reference section. And what's happening right now is people are being asked to put all this information in the supplementary materials. There is no parsability of that and recognition of how do we count those as having been utilization of that data. How do we build reproducibility? How do we build any of those pieces that start to make the all the capabilities that we wanted to generate out of having the data cited? And so that's a real challenge for both the attribution and the usage tracing for these data sets, software, physical samples. And so thinking about this reliquary as this container that serves as an extension of the reference section and enables you to include all these in a formatted way that then enables machine readability and traceability and some of these capabilities that we'd like. So with that, I think I'm done, but we'd like to encourage you. We're forming a working group, as Leslie mentioned, and we'd like to encourage you, if you're interested in helping with this use case, to join. We put together a plan for this working group. We hope to form it very quickly. We had a BO4 yesterday. I think it was yesterday, your time, and not this morning. I've lost track of. Since I'm all the way on the west coast of the U.S., it's a little hard to know exactly what day it is for you. But basically, we really feel that it's just urgent that we solve this challenge. Even if we come up with a simplistic solution, if it works to even a first degree, it would be amazing. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Leslie.
Deb, Rama has a question in the chat asking if journal editors still have the responsibility to check that all the links in a reliquary actually work.
I go ahead.
Well, I was, so the process of, well, Deb, why don't you go ahead talking about how we would create the reliquary and form it.
Well, actually, I want to give a more general answer, because I think the reality is that's part of this effort that we're doing, is figuring that all out. Which parts are the responsibility of the reliquary infrastructure, which parts of it are the responsibility of the publisher. Ideally, the reliquary infrastructure and where it's hosted have played a part in that, and are providing, a first level of checking on all of that. Likely the publisher is still going to want to make any checks they would have made in anything in the reference section. But I would hope that when we create these reliquaries, that there was already built-in checking that made it highly likely that those are going to resolve well.
Okay, I think we need to move on. Shelley or Deb, because I can't use the chat, can you put the link to the working group where people can sign up in the chat, please? Deb, can you do that while Shelley introduces her friend? Shelley, I've never seen that friend before, and I've worked with you for years.
Oh, my friend, oh my God, he's new. He's a new member of the team. This is Noah. Hello. And Noah is 3 months old tomorrow. He is an Australian Labradoodle. So Leslie, I missed you so much. I had to get a dog.
So is that spelled N-O-A-H or N-O-A-A?
N-O-A-H. As
Sorry,
opposed to the federal institution.
Oh.
That's great. I love it. Yeah.
It's a data person, Shelley. I thought you would have been.
But yeah, my
okay, right. Sorry. All right, let's move on. Okay, so Beth, whoops. Go back up. Oh, sorry, Beth. I can't remember her name. Asked. I thought she was coming to this session.
I am. I'm here.
Are you here? Fantastic. Beth, over to you, please.
I'm the one hanging out in the room. It would have been really nice to meet all of you in person, and maybe one day we'll get to that.
Can you
point.
turn your volume up? I'm struggling to hear you, or talk closer to the microphone, please.
I think the mic just needs to be turned on.
Is the mic, is it on now?
Say something else. Beth.
Can
There we
you
go.
hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear
Okay.
you now.
Oh,
Thank you very
perfect.
much.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you, Leslie, for giving me just a couple of minutes here. I just want to introduce this really quickly that we have an open call for RDA/EOSC Future domain ambassadors that may be of interest to members of this group or colleagues that you work with in your research community specifically. So, please feel free to share this widely. This is the second round of ambassador calls that have been launched in partnership with the EOSC Future project. So you do see the RDA/EOSC Future, or at least it will be the second round very shortly because the call hasn't actually been posted to the website yet. You're getting a sneak peek here at the plenary. But if you go to the link in the slide, you can see all the details from round one, because we did also have another call for domain ambassadors in the spring. And the details are basically the same, except for a couple of distinctions. One is the new deadline of September 15th, 2022. And you'll see a list here of targeted domains that'll be given priority when evaluating the applications this time around. And I'd like to highlight for this group, both the Earth and related environmental sciences and astronomy as targeted disciplines. So just to give you a quick idea of why we have priority domains. As I mentioned, this call is in partnership with EOSC Future, which aims to develop the European Open Science Cloud platform, consisting of data, professionally provided services, and open research products and infrastructure. This call is funded with the goal of making EOSC more receptive and responsive to the needs and realities of various domain-specific research communities through the development of a network of experts who are able to share their disciplinary know-how and community achievements specifically with EOSC. So the list of research communities identified here are those that were highlighted in an RDA for EOSC report that aim to map the state of awareness and readiness of various disciplinary communities, specifically to engage with EOSC. And this was based on a number of factors, including presence of standards, policies, frameworks, roadmaps, registries, and catalogs, alongside other indicators of interoperability and just sort of general progress towards open science. So it seemed kind of obvious when we were launching these calls, we were looking for ambassadors for EOSC, that we would specifically ask people from these communities to tell us a little bit more about how EOSC can help enhance participation in your field. So I do want to clarify that you don't have to work within one of these domains in order to apply. The call is open, and I really would encourage everyone who is so interested, anyone who is interested in applying and going ahead and applying. It's just that these specific domains will be given priority when we're evaluating the applications. The money does have to go to someone residing in or working for an organization in the EU or associate countries. And if you want more information about that, you can follow the link and there's a little bit of an explanation. Now, if you're not necessarily working in a European context, there are other ways that you can be involved in this work. And because one of the things that I hope to do with input from the domain ambassadors and other experts in various fields is reimagine the disciplinary introduction pages on the RDA website. So I don't know how many of you have visited the RDA homepage recently, but if you look at the top level navigation, you'll see there is a link called RDA for disciplines, which has been rather sparsely populated by kind of a handful of disciplines over the years. And the goal, one of my goals, is to improve representation across the disciplines and maybe align the content of the pages a bit better. And to that end, I have a suggested template that I will be sharing out for feedback, and I would like to share it with this group in particular, because Earth and environmental and related environmental sciences and the astronomy are not, or Earth and environmental, sorry, they're not represented in the disciplinary pages. So it would be nice to get some representation there. So that's it. That's my spiel. If you have any questions, please get in touch with me. We would love to see some applications from your group.
Okay. Thank you very much. Is there any quick questions of Beth? Because we'll have to move on. All right. Okay. So now we'll move on to Kirsten, who's just arrived. Kirsten, do you want to tell us about the planetary efforts that are going on?
So I'm having problems. Can you hear me actually?
Yeah. And your camera is pointed at your necklace. Oh no, it's not. It's right now. Go for it.
Yeah, no, I'm looking now at my laptop. Yeah, I was trying to get a Zoom link, but if this works, that's fine. We had originally planned a breakout on investigating, how many of the participants in the ESIP interest group are from the space sciences. Space is one of the words in our name, actually, Earth, Space, and Environmental Sciences interest group. And I have currently started to work on planetary data as well, and so was interested to see how many people in our interest group are participating with an interest in the space sciences, if we should be reaching out to better engage data systems and researchers from the space and planetary science, identify where we can work together and benefit from each other and what we could learn from each other between the Earth and the planetary sciences. So let me just ask briefly, was anybody who is currently in the session planning to attend the breakout on the planetary data systems? Can you just put up a thumbs up or something that indicates that you were interested?
Oh.
And that's
Yes,
what
I
I
was. But
But
I can talk to you afterwards.
you can talk to me. So it's interesting, from my perspective, that we have this word in our name, but we haven't really reached out to that community. And I would be very interested to start a campaign in some way to identify, basically discuss these questions that I've put out here and see if there is a desire or a need to work in this field. And I saw there was a comment. Did I see that? Like to leverage. Okay, yes. Or is that pertaining to something else here? I think it pertains to, it's a response to something that was probably a direct chat.
Okay, but then, so if anyone's interested in planetary or knows of someone who's interested in planetary, contact Kirsten. Kirsten, it might be worthwhile if you put something on the group's email list, because the group's email list is quite large.
That's a good idea. Great. Yes,
you may get a response. Yeah. And again, this kind of shows what we're doing in this project, that Kirsten's starting this work and she's trying to find out who else is there. Okay, so just briefly, we're just about on time, although I can't see the agenda, but I think we are. But I'd just like to put someone in the audience on the spot, and that's Kerry from ARDC. Kerry, do you want to just say a few quick words about the ARDC Planet Thematic Data Commons? Can you unmute, Kerry?
I think
I was muted twice. So double muted. Thanks, Leslie. I'm Kerry Levitt from the Australian Research Data Commons, and I am running the consultations for our new thematic Research Data Commons, which is codenamed Planet. So the Research Data Commons brings together people, skills, data, and things like storage and compute and software and models to enable researchers to conduct their data-intensive research. At the moment, we have ARDC has a humanities and social sciences RDC that started, and we are running consultations to start up a people and planet, people focusing on health and planet. Is a very broad and slightly problematic title in that it's it means different things to different people. So we're probably focusing on environmental sciences, ecology, biodiversity, but possibly agriculture and the earth sciences as well. So at the moment, we're just in the very early beginnings, where I'm talking to people in the sector to find out what we're looking at, what researchers would need from a environmental science / earth and environmental science research data commons. And that's why I am here, listening to what's going on in the broad sector.
Okay. Thanks very much. Is there anyone else who wants to speak from the audience about some new thing they're starting up or some new project?
Oh,
Yoshihiro, do you have anything?
Leslie, have you mentioned one geochemistry at all?
We did that as a breakout last time. So I did talk about welfare and one geochemistry, how it works in that earlier.
Okay.
Leslie, I can bring up 2 items.
Okay,
really
great.
briefly.
Go ahead.
So one of them is a new funded effort from NASA on artificial intelligence and machine learning ethics, specifically within the Earth, Space, and Environmental Sciences. And that this is meant to be an international group that comes together to build out those principles and responsibilities for the purpose of then using them to update scientific code of conduct. So if anyone has an interest in that, please do send me a note. I'll put my email in the chat. And then the other one, also funded by NASA, is open science work that we're doing with the NASA headquarters, helping build out curriculum for very high level open science. So really any discipline, not just NASA oriented disciplines, but definitely including those and all. And the intention is the modules will actually work for any discipline so that anyone can actually use them. And there will be 5 online modules with badging and incentives that go with the badging. So if you have an interest in that, you're welcome to reach out.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think it's now time to go on to the, whoops, sorry, Danny, deep dive. And as I know, I'm likely to have to break out. Would Shelley, or if I stop sharing my screen, Shelley and Danny, can you now take over, please?
I think so. Let's see. I have not figured out. I can break this out. Oh, wait, who's sharing now? Oh, that's got to be Shelley, right? Or is that you still?
Oh my gosh.
Oh,
I was
no,
talking to
Shelley's
you.
fast.
I was talking
You're
to you.
so
I'm like,
fast.
Danny, I've got you. Don't worry. Okay, carry on.
You're fast. You're so fast. Okay, thank you for steering and driving. Right, so this is similar to Shelley and Deb's complex citations proposed working group. This is an issue that sort of emerged in the US around 2020. And the problem sort of stems around this workflow of data publication in conjunction with the scholarly paper publication. And so what I'd like to do right now, since I think we went from 2 breakouts to just me here now, 1, then I'll probably go through these slides rather quickly initially because they set up the context, and because the group has, or this effort has sort of been ongoing since about 2020, and I'll show a nice sort of summary of activities, get to the background, the context, and then get to a proposed case statement, which is really the meat of the breakout, trying to solicit some feedback on that, and then pretty much garner some members to move it forward. And that's assuming there's good, solid interest in this. So take it away, Shelley, if you could advance the slides. So here's the problem in a nutshell. Journals and publishers are now requiring that the data backing up the hypothesis-driven scholarly publication needs to be in a recognized repository, preferably a domain repository. These domain repositories have long history. They're often quite tightly coupled in their processes. And there's not a lot of communication or awareness between these 2 workflows. The scholarly publication moves through its system, the data moves through the repository, and the author researcher is sort of caught navigating in between the 2. They are often not fully informed, and they come to the data repository with this corpus of data to be deposited, and they need a DOI and they need a citation immediately. And this is putting a strain on the repositories and their workflow to meet the needs or the perceived needs of the author and the upstream journal and peer review. So the gist here is that we're going to try and bring awareness to both of these workflows, add a little communication, build some consensus on some recommendations that would help these touch points between author repository and author journal publisher move a little easier. Go ahead with the next slide, please. And so, as I said, this started in the US, where this problem was emerging in the form of the Council of Data Facilities. So a lot of domain repositories were starting to raise their hands saying, hey, is anybody else having this issue? We're drowning under these immediate demands because we do really heavy domain curation. It's challenging for us to meet these needs when everybody comes with I need a DOI because my paper is already in peer review and they're demanding it now. And so we promoted this within ESIP. We promoted this within RDA under this this interest group, and we started to hear other repositories saying, "Yeah, I have this problem as well," primarily in the U.S. And so when we have socialized it with RDA, we hear a few smatterings of folks, but really it'd be great to, and later I'll show you this in the use case, to get some use cases down besides just the few that came forward initially. So here's what this looks like. We've been socializing it between RDA and ESIP. AGU helped provide a workshop on this topic and pull in some of the publishers who helped us refine the publishing workflow. And so we've gotten up to this point. It's been a slow process primarily because it's driven by me with support with Shelley and Leslie. And so hopefully with this working group, we'll be able to get some more people on this effort. Okay, next slide. So we managed to document a workflow. This is pretty complex, and I've shared it with this group or through this interest group before. This is sort of the big picture. This has repository in geez, I can't even see my own, but in blue, the author's interactions with the repository in green, and then the publisher in purple. And there are a lot of feedback loops as the paper moves through this workflow, and it's kind of complex. So we sort of tried to zoom in on the touch points between all of these different activities. And if you can advance to the next one, with the help from Shelley on the AGU side, we managed to refine generalize the publisher workflow or the journal workflow. And so we have these two workflows. We know where the touch points are. We know where we need to provide this communication and maybe recommendations. And I won't dig into these right now because I feel like we've kind of socialized these quite a bit. But if you go to the next slide, we came out with all of this effort with a set of recommendations. We had a set for journals, which basically says, hey, we need to help authors find appropriate repositories. We need to give them a sense of the overall timing of when they need data DOIs and citations to make that data available to peer review and to have the citation to go into the publication process. And then if they do need to dig into the data, let the repositories know that they need a share link, they need potentially blind or double blind review of data prior to publication. So that's on the journal side. This was sort of this distilled between the two groups and between the amount of information that we could present to them. This is what we came back with for the journals. And if you hit the next slide, you can see for the repositories, which was basically get a handle on providing access to that data for peer review of the publication. And this could be done by a share link. There are other ways to do this. Some repositories already have this capacity. We realized that some repositories would need to build this capacity, but it seems like a critical piece in this process. And part of that is to provide the confidentiality of the person coming in to review that data. Okay, so those were our two sets of recommendations. If you hit the next slide, the last bit of socialization came at summer ESIP of last year, winter ESIP of, it was an ESIP. Now I'm blanking on whether it was a year ago or whether it was just this winter. So we came up with, speedy. We came up with some feedback from ESIP folks. Let's see, where are we in that slide deck? We kind of jumped around there.
Hang on, I'll figure it out.
That's okay. Let's see. Hang tight.
I did not mean to do
the navigation's so hard. Can you go to slide 34? You found it. So here's where I sort of got stalled out. Oops. There we go. We got sort of hung up here. Some of these are affirmations. Some of these might be worth digging into and figuring out, well, if the repository can't provide a share link, what are the alternatives for this? Or, can repositories reserve DOIs? How challenging is that for them? So there might be some areas of this feedback to dig into. Some of these are just affirmations, like, yes, publishers should recommend domain repositories. We're all on board with that. And so what I need to do is kind of vet this information, go back to the recommendations and see if they need any tweaking, and then figure out how to start legitimizing them and promoting them. And so that's where the interest group comes into play, or excuse me, the working group comes into play. And so now I think if we just advance one, we get to kind of these idea of next steps. It would be great to form a working group. I have a case statement that's drafted. I went to RDA and actually started this, and I had a few people who who joined, and even without anything there, they are altruistically on board. And so what I'd like to do is during this time, try and go through the steps of this case statement and see if we're on track, see if this is value to the rest of the community. And then hopefully we form our working group, we get our case statement approved, we forge ahead with the work plan that's outlined there. We finalize it, we get RDA endorsement, and life is great. So that's where I am right here. There are some links on the side here to the interest group page, the draft case statement, which I also chunked into the next couple slides to review during the breakout. And I don't know if that's the most efficient way, but in light of the time constraints, I wasn't really sure how to best use this time. So maybe the best thing here is to pause and see if anybody has any questions before trying to review a case statement, because maybe not everybody has interest in this particular breakout, the sole breakout. And I see there's nothing new, so in the chat.
Kirsten has her hand up.
Yeah, Kristen.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, we're one of the folks who struggle, right, with expectations from users who submit their data and want to be served immediately. I'm definitely supportive of this going forward, but I wonder, you know, if we need to focus it on something realistic. I mean, we have had, you know, a number of attempts on getting publishers to follow certain guidelines, the FAIR project, you know, COPTES initial commitment statement, and so on. And I wonder if we start with really aligning workflows within the repositories, that, you know, we march ahead with sort of best practices on our side, and you know, get our workflow in order and consistent, and then, you know, do the next step to engage again with the publishers to work on them coming, basically adopting what we have in place by them.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I struggle with this too. So in trying to draft the case statement, I looked at other researcher efforts that you have to align with, or at least compare that, you know, within RDA, and there was a data publication workflows working group that was trying to provide recommendations on an idealized data publication workflow, and they were a little critical of this effort, or they were concerned that we were trying to reinvent the wheel. And the one thing that I wanted to sort of emphasize was that we weren't trying to standardize individual domain repositories workflows. That would be really challenging to do, but there are key activities that I think we could all agree on as domain repositories that and I think maybe that's what you're talking about. Not necessarily like they provided a schematic of a workflow, like those two that I showed in the previous slides, that was an idealized, finalized static data set, and what that would look like in a perfect world. And of course, none of us adhere to that. You know, none of us could follow this. And so I wanted to kind of draw the distinction between that. Like, we're not, I don't want to impose some standardized workflow and say, oh, well, you know, if you're a repository, you should do these steps, because, you know, when you look at the domain repositories funded in the US, they're all over the place on when they apply the DOI or the level of domain curation and how much they iterate with an author, or there's all kinds of unique snowflake repository, processes. But if I'm understanding, I think what you're saying is maybe the recommendations on the repository side, we can go ahead and do ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's just components of the workflow and a certain order or something. It needs to be a low-hanging fruit, I think. And you're very right about the diversity. We just experienced that. The Critical Zone Network, which is a research program in the US, we have built a data submission hub for this, with multiple repositories participating in a central submission site. And we needed to basically align our procedures, at least, and that was a major challenge. The effort to have a single submission process for repositories that have different level of review, or some no review at all, and the level of communication with authors and so on, to make that all identical was basically impossible. But there are components in the process that maybe can align a little better, and it's clarifying.
I agree.
Whose responsibility is what, what
Right.
is responsibility of the repository versus responsibility of the publisher or the editor.
Yes, exactly what I'm thinking. So maybe Shelley, could you advance the slides? So maybe it would be helpful if I could run a few things by you. So charter, I'm not so worried about, because I think high level idealized, people are understanding what we're trying to achieve. But if you go advance one more, Shelley, and let's see so specific objectives, in relation to what you're saying, Kirsten, I would love to kind of dig into this and see if this makes sense, or if this is biting off too much. And I know Deb commented that she kind of feels this challenge as well in the ESS dive. And so maybe, having people put eyes on this and see if this makes sense, or if this is not the right approach, or commenting on, in the context of what you just said, like maybe scoping this down initially, or where does that activity fit in the overall objectives of trying to achieve this. So here, this is taking a stab at it. This is just me throwing something out there with, requesting feedback. So in the context of getting shared understandings on both sides, that's pretty, that's just socializing what we do. But what I thought would be helpful is this maybe fourth bullet of documenting use cases. And maybe from the documented use cases, we could build consensus on what repositories can do, what's acceptable in a group of repositories.
I agree. I think, just making sure we understand each other's procedures and kind of also learn from. I'm always amazed when I see somebody else's, workflow, say, oh, that's a good idea, or that's a bad idea. Or, knowing what everybody is doing is the foundation of kind of trying to align something or be more consistent in the procedures. So it's definitely worth it, but as usual, there's always concerns about who does all the work, right?
Right. Well, that is it. And that's the reason why it's, it started in 2020, and this is as far as it's gotten, because it's primarily me trying to squeeze it in between, other efforts and other draws on time. So I'm hoping that, let's see, there were a few people who actually, without a charter, joined the group. And so I'm hoping there are going to be at least a few more people that we can maybe make some progress. And even if we just get sort of these folks to tell their use case that we could get a short compendium of that, and then maybe as a group review those. But that seems like a first step. Maybe would be
Isn't there? I
to
mean,
move things forward on repositories.
Many
Yeah.
have documented their workflows for contrast seal applications and so on. Maybe there is actually more available in documentation than we think.
That would
Danny?
be a great idea. Yes.
Danny, Deb has her hand up. She's had it up for a while.
Oh, well, I apologize, Deb. I am so inept at reading this screen. Go for it.
Oh, no worries. It's been an interesting conversation. I mean, we actually were just talking about what are we going to implement for this exact case. And I think one of the things I'd really want to see is that we also, you talked about sort of the direct case where everything works and, you know, the paper gets published. And I guess the other piece of it is thinking about all the degenerate cases that happen, like, oh, well, the paper got rejected or the paper needs, you know, adjustment, and where you've created this mechanism in your repository, you've got this data hanging out there with some amount of almost open access, but it never got published. And then you don't have a tie back to what was the end result of the paper and when can I actually publish this data? Because I think that's the other piece of the handshake. We've had people ask for the early DOI. We've helped them with getting their data reviewed, and then they never came back and published the data, right? And so, I mean, there's all these degenerative use cases on the back end of this whole process that I really want to make sure that we also are addressing, because otherwise the repository's got a ton of things sitting out in the open in some form that it's unclear what they can and can't do with and when.
Yeah, that's a great point. So that kind of speaks to Kirsten's many and the whole, you know, idea of uniqueness, right? And that workflow. So my repository, folks are mandated to come to us by the funder, regardless of whether they publish those data or not. And so I don't typically see that use case that you're describing. What I do see is, you know, some variant of that where it's I only want to publish this small slice that supports table 2, even though there's a whole corpus out there that they're not coming to us for. And they're not going to do that until they absolutely get the acceptance of the paper, and then the rush is on. And so I'm sure there are others as well. I know that there's Shelley could help me out with the acronym for what the full repository for MAGIC is. And they have yet another unique workflow that would make this process a challenge. And so just documenting all of those positive and negative results, like you're saying, the sort of.
Can I riff off a little bit on what you just said, Danny, and connect it to what Deb said? It might be
Except I just lost your audio.
Oh, did you? Can you hear me now? No?
I can hear you, Shelley.
I can hear you, Shelley.
Okay, thank you.
Everybody's audio.
Sorry. Sorry. So one thing that it's not clear to most
I hope other people are hearing you. If you can hear me, I can't hear you.
I can hear Danny, but
oh, now I got you.
Oh, now you have
strange.
Okay. All right.
I got you.
Something that's not well documented that we learned doing one of the projects at AGU is how the reference actually moves through the publication process through to be identified as connected to the publication on the other side. And there's a number of pitfalls there. And it would be really good to present that to repositories so they know how to avoid them. Like, for instance, one of the challenges that MAGIC has, paleomagnetism, is they won't publish their data until the paper's published. And what that means is we literally cannot make a link to their data for them. It goes through as essentially garbage because the DOI doesn't resolve, and we can't send DOIs that are not complete as in the reference section. And so the only way Magic can recover is by creating the links themselves from the repository using tools like Scholix. And this is a choice, but it doesn't work well. I mean, it means Magic has to take the full responsibility, and the journal can no longer be the authoritative source for that linkage. And I think there's something to be said about knowing that when you're designing your workflow. So I think a presentation might be useful to explain all that as part of this working group.
So in the context of gathering these use cases, repository specific use cases. Yes. Yeah, I think that's great.
Yep. We've really learned a lot in the last 6 months, and we actually solved one of the software problems that AGU was having, that Wiley was having, that will actually solve, that it's a third-party provider that is used by most publishers that I bet you hardly anyone even knows was an issue. But because we were digging in on this problem, we found it. It took us 18 months to find it. So the software update went in about 2 weeks ago, and we'll have an F1000 paper out hopefully soon, hopefully by the end of this month, in order to document the problem and help other journals know how to solve it, how to take advantage of what was fixed, and that it even was an issue. So there's a number of murky pieces of the puzzle.
Well, so it sounds like some pieces are fixing themselves, but in the
hardly.
But in the context of
hardly fixing themselves.
Wouldn't it be great if all the pieces fixed themselves? But
we did finally get to the bottom.
So suggesting, I'm just trying to take notes in our notes document, suggesting sort of repository sharing meeting.
Yeah, and I think it can be all part of this particular case. And I think it digs in a different way than other RDA working groups have. And by becoming an RDA working group, you can then solicit from the existing working groups and make sure that we've not, I know you're not going to do this on your own. We'll do it. I'll definitely be there with you, but that we'll be able to make sure that we covered everything they've explored previously, and they see that this as a deep dive into a particular kind of issue, and it's scoped. I think it's scoped pretty tightly.
Cool. That sounds great. So,
yeah.
Well, I just saw our queue that we have to vacate. So
yeah,
at least I hope I gave everybody. I know. I mean, I hope I presented at least enough of a picture that kind of intrigues people enough to say, hey, yeah, this is meaningful, and I want to kind of help advance it, because it's moving at a snail's pace with just me behind it pushing, and of course with your fantastic help on the side. But
would anybody like to co-chair with you? That might be a good question to ask. Is there anyone particularly interested and would like to co-chair? Don't all jump at once.
Right.
I shall do it.
Noah.
So my job was to wrap it up, and so I'd like to thank all of our speakers today. This was as always a very interesting session. I know Kirsten's not anymore, nor is Sarah Ramdeen, but it was really good hearing from them. Deb, thank you very much. And Beth, who looks like she's no longer in the room. Beth, you left us. Really good to hear about the funding opportunity. I think we should all try to take advantage of that if we can. And please join the 2 working groups if you haven't done so already. And Danny, Deb and I set up a time to finish out the charter so that we can move forward with submitting. So I'm happy to do that
Nice.
for you as well, and get us moving along.
Sounds good.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks to you and Leslie.
Actually, I think Leslie did all the work. I think all I did was show
I'm
up.
still,
Thanks, Leslie.
I'm actually still here. I got so
How are you doing
confused.
that?
I was looking at the time. I thought I had to go and start the vocab session. That's not for another couple of hours. That's why I asked you to take off, because I'd got the time conversion mixed up. So yeah, I don't have to start that till 12:30. Ugh.
Ooh,
So,
ooh.
yeah.
Well,
It's a
Leslie, I
week.
think this worked out really well. I think we should just move
Oh.
forward with our 2 charters and check the scopes. And
Yeah.
I think we're in good shape.
Yeah, well, sorry, when I woke up this morning and saw these emails from people like, you know, Kirsten not being able to do the planetary breakout, and that I went, ah! And then I shut my email down and went and had a cup of coffee and then came back and opened up. But yeah, no, it worked out well. Okay, all right, catch you all later.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks,
Leslie.
everyone.
Everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Leslie. Bye-bye.